I got something to say about that, though. We only thing about that we know is at the polls we know. And I got something to say about
Mr.
it.
Chairman, thank you. The elections office have 3 staff, 2 full-time staff, and 1 part-time staff member. And we also have the 6 registering officers, 3 deputy supervisors, and 1 supervisor of elections. And the office is open from 9 to 4.
And you have in office at all times how many? 2 persons
2 persons, sir.
in the elections office. Now, are you satisfied that that is accommodating the continuous increase and registration process?
Just spoken to the deputy supervisor. She's satisfied with the staffing levels. And of course, the member will know that the majority of the new persons that are being registered are done by the registering officers. So I'm advised that the staff operations are working well. But if the member has some concerns, I'd be happy to take them and investigate.
Mr. Chairman, thanks. I thank the member. We are some 2 years away, but I think it's close enough for me to begin to watch my back. I have utmost confidence in Mr. Howell and his team. I've never had any problems with the elections office, never. I think we've always had, above board. I have my concerns with the last one. I don't think it was fair, but that's gone. My concern is the new one coming. And I'm going to ask them to make sure, and I want to be assured, that those, whomsoever they get, a lot of them are civil servants who are chosen to work in the polling stations, that they are politically neutral. I watched it for several years now, and I've had my concerns. Like I said, never about the problem, never any problems with the actual machinery. You know, we had things to do, we straightened out things, and we couldn't get a list before. Now we can get all these sorts of little things, but never any huge problem. I think Mr. Gomez did a fantastic job, him and that team. And then, as I said, I have the utmost confidence in this new team. But I watched it the last time. I've seen, in fact, civil servants who stood on the roadside and gave me the thumbs down in my motorcade. And then I went to the polls, and they were working. At my polls, at my district, I've seen civil servants, when the results come out, listen, as I keep telling them, they don't make me lose an election like that, not me. My election is one when you see me go down there. It's one. But you have to at least appear neutral. At least you have to have the appearance of neutrality. And it is, I've seen too much of it now, and I think they're going to have to, Ms. Glasgow and Mr. Howard are going to have to be watched carefully. I saw it the last time, and if I see those people back there this time, I'm going to raise a lot of ruckus. Maybe I won't get anywhere, but I tell you what, I'm going to raise ruckus about it because they are not neutral.
Thank you, Mr. Bush.
Mr. Chairman, his concerns are noted, and I would encourage the member to contact Mr. Howell and pass any information he has about those persons from now.
I'm going to have a chat with Mr. Howell and Ms. Glasgow on it.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. McLean.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I have some concerns about the election law. And there are a number of areas in the election law that we had particular problems with over the last few elections, and then more so in the last election. election expenses reform, um, the section on treating that we need to deal with, the list of electors that is sent out from the election office, it cannot be manipulated, and and that kind of rubbish. And you got to go and buy the hard copy, the bars. This is antiquated stuff that, because of the law and its inadequacies, we're in the 21st century, nearly 22nd century, you know, and we need to be a little more liberal in our approach. The list of electors sits in the custody of a magistrate in this country. If you want to manipulate the one that you get, go ahead. Because that one there is the official list. And the law says, whenever there's a question, that's the list that will determine the outcome of that question. That is the one that the magistrate is in their custody. This thing about registration every quarter, it causes nothing but problems when election cycle has come around. We can't, if it's in May, January, February, March, you can't register until it's the end of March. Then there's none, you got 6 weeks that you could put people on that register. This is the electronic age. You know, we stick to the regime of you can go and register as much as you want, wherever you want, but if you register on the first day of that quarter, the last quarter was done yesterday, and today you fill out the form as the individual to register, you don't get on the list until the end of that particular quarter. I've never in my life known why we cannot do. They can make an application next week. They got 10 people that they want to add on to the register. They go make an application at the court and do it. And when you're at that stage of election, I can appreciate it being cut off a couple of weeks before. Gives you sufficient time to get your electronic register out and the people at the polls, the right one. If that person is entitled to vote, why are we disenfranchising them? This is the 21st century. And we can do that. We can call a judge in the middle of the night, go to authenticate, or I think that's how they call it, those people to say that they are eligible to be on the register. But they will never get on again until for the next 4 years to register, to participate in the election. These are the things we need, and I encourage the director of elections and supervisor and deputy supervisor. We need to look at these things and be a little open-minded, and let's do some proposals so we can bring it here. And it's too onerous on people, not only the electors but the candidates as well. And I'm asking the deputy governor, you know, you don't want politicians in it because but it's there for everybody to see. It will be there for everybody to see. If people think that candidates or electors at this time, it's us who going to make the laws anyway. It's us here now, you know. Let's do something with it.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. Mr. McLean. Mr. Miller.
Yep, Mr. Chairman, thank you. Mr. Chairman, I can just say that it's not a coincidence that we appointed someone with an IT background to be our supervisor. We accept the points made by the member from East End. I have here with me the supervisor of election, Mr. The supervisor sent his apologies. He's actually off island doing some training, but Ms. Glasgow is here and she would like to give a response to what the member is saying.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. Sheena Glasgow, Deputy Supervisor of Elections under the Elections Officer. In response to the member through you, Mr. Chairman, I can advise Finance Committee that in general, the subject of elections expenses and the reform surrounding elections expenses is definitely on the agenda for the Supervisor of Elections and his team to reform and update. In general, as the Deputy Governor has already stated, IT reform and how we can make the process more current, more, shall I say, elector friendly, as well as for candidates, how we can improve that whole process. At this point, I can't speak to specifics because we're still in discussions as a team, but it is an issue that we are reviewing and wanting to make some improvements on. We are mindful that many of these types of reforms will need to be reflected in the elections legislation itself, not just reform related to the work of the Electoral Boundaries Commission. So in terms of electoral reform of legislation, the office itself is focused on some of these issues, sir, and we're leaving Electoral Boundaries Commission to that body as it's independent. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman,
Thank you.
I take it that Ms. Glasgow meant when she said there's stuff that they want to improve, that she meant that they are going to recommend. That it's not that the election office is going to do it. And I just want to get that clear, because someone listening to this will think that the election office can do it, but it's this august body that needs to do it.
Mr. Chairman, through you, I thank the member for clarification and confirm, sir. The office is looking at recommending improvements which will have to be embraced or not by this body, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Miller?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, can we try to advance to automatic voter registration at age 18 for Caymanians based on their registry at birth? Because the government has all these records, and you should be able, when I register my daughter, to flag it up, and when she gets 18, she gets her voter's registration card in the mail.
Mr. Chairman, through
At
you,
least a notice to come in and pick up her card, or rather than expecting people to fill out all these forms and stuff.
Mr. Chairman, through you, sir, I confirm that that is, again, one of the issues that the team is reviewing and seeing how we can perhaps make that happen, and would put forward in a proposal.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any further questions? If there are no further questions, then all those in favor of CIV 13, maintenance of the electoral register for $412,248, standing part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye. Aye. Those against, no. CIV 14, support for commissions, $859,362 on page 250. Are there any questions? Mr. McLean?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I wonder if the Deputy Governor can tell us how far on they are with the thoughts. I hope it's only the thoughts of amalgamating the FOI and Complaints Commissioner. Anti-corruption too, I believe.
Mr. Chairman, yes, that is something that we have progressing. We're putting together a business case that will set out very clearly what are the benefits of this, pros, cons, weaknesses, cost, everything is being covered in this document. We're following a very robust process to make sure that we are doing this properly in accordance with best practice, and we expect that we will have the document finished by the first week, I think, in July, and then we will be able to get it on the caucus schedule for sometime in July. But it is moving ahead, and those are the timelines as I suggested.
Thank you, Deputy Governor.
Let me ask the Deputy Governor. What is the intent here? What's the intent? And in general terms, and how do we maintain the independence of these commissions? By amalgamating them.
Mr. Chairman, the business case is going to look at all of those issues. The idea at a very high level is to merge these offices to where obviously they'll be in one location, so we'll have savings on accommodation, hopefully cross-training staff so that we can have a better and more efficient service. But to overall, and this has been a clear mandate from the government, is to ensure that the independence and effectiveness of these offices are not compromised. And we have seen this working in other jurisdictions and very effectively. So certainly we would not go down this road if we felt that the independence of these offices or the effectiveness of these offices would be compromised. As a matter of fact, to the contrary, we believe it can be enhanced.
Mr. Chairman, as I recall, many of these commissions have the following wording: in the exercise of their functions, the commission and its members shall not be subject to the direction or control of any other person or authority. I think that spells specifically the independence of these bodies. And if we amalgamate a number of these bodies, then we compromise that independence by having one person ahead of them all. It is a serious matter. And I want to go on record today to say that I am not supporting the amalgamation of these offices. I believe they need their independence. I believe they need their separation. One of them even reports directly to this legislature. And this legislature has some authority over that. And what are we going to do? Put 2-3 hats on one individual and in one office, and the exposure and the cross, what do you call it, pollination, and then you get some members in one authority knowing what the other's doing, and it's the tenets of secrecy is eroded. Mr. Chairman, I want the Deputy Governor to know and pass it on to the Governor. I am but one, but it just so happens I'm here. And that I will never support. If we have a global ombudsman, it cannot be for some of these commissions that are enshrined in this Constitution, unless we change the Constitution. Somebody needs to show me where these commissions are have their place within the Constitution individually. And we are now changing that as one global ombudsman. That, if we're going to go with the Constitution, be that whether it's good, bad, or indifferent, we need to follow it. If it is not what we want, we need to change it and create a global ombudsman, and with all these listed therein or thereunder. I can't. I will not. I will not. And I'm sure the leader, the premier, knows that it would not meet with my approval. I'm sure he does. He knows that. And the one for the Complaints Commissioner shall not be subject to the direction or control of anyone. Register of interest, it is, they're all here.
Thank you, Mr. McLean. I think the point is well taken now.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you, Deputy Governor. Mr. Bush, you have a question, sir?
Mr. Chairman, can the member say how far the Constitutional Commission has gotten in their review of constitutional changes that they were making, that they were looking for?
Mr. Chairman, I'm advised that the Commission did a report. It was with suggested changes. It was sent to the Leader of the Opposition and the Premier for comment. The Leader of the Opposition has responded. We are now waiting on the government to get its official position before further action is taken.
Thank you. Mr. Bush, you have a follow-up?
Thank you. Just to make it absolutely clear that my response is I'm not interested.
Yes, sir. That has been noted.
Thank you, Mr. Bush. There are no further questions. You're welcome, sir. No further questions. We proceed to vote. So all those in favor of CIV 14, support for commissions, $859,362 standing part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, no. CIV 15, policy advice and administrative support provided to the Deputy Governor, $216,137 on page 251. Are there any questions? Mr. Bush, you have a question, sir? All those in favor of CIV 15, policy advice and administrative support provided to the Deputy Governor for $216,137 standing part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, no. CIN 2, health insurance for civil service pensioners, $21,350,990 on page 252. Are there any questions? All those in favor of CIN 2, Health insurance for civil service pensioners, $21,350,990, standing part of the schedule to the bill. Please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, no. NGS 20, Employee Assistance Program for $126,000. Are there any questions? All those in favor of NGS 20, Employee Assistance Program for $126,000, standing part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, no. Other executive expenses, OE2, personal emoluments for Her Excellency the Governor, Premier, Deputy Premier, Speaker of the Legislative Assembly, ministers, elected members of the Legislative Assembly, and Deputy Governor, $3,392,323. Are there any questions? Page 279.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. McLean?
I believe I made a mistake, sir. I was going to ask the deputy governor, that's old age, okay? You're next. You gotta get there too.
Absolutely.
Mr. Chairman, I wanted to ask the deputy governor, I should have done it on another head, but I believe this will suffice. Does he support the separation of powers? Does the deputy governor support the separation of powers? Well, the further separation of powers.
Yes, sir. I do.
You do?
Yes, sir.
So we will see that because the premier has in passing mentioned setting up a committee to review it.
Mr. McLean,
Okay.
we dealt with that previously,
Okay, I wasn't here. I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
Yes, sir.
But you do support it.
I do, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. So all those in favor of OE2, personal emoluments for Her Excellency the Governor, Premier, Deputy Premier, Speaker of the Legislative Assembly, ministers, elected members of the Legislative Assembly, and Deputy Governor for $3,392,323, standing part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, no. OE19, ex gratia recipients plan payments, $1,213,000 on page 280. Are there any questions? Mr. McLean?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can the deputy governor explain exactly how what categories of when do you pay ex gratia payment to past government employees?
Mr. Chairman, just give me a minute, please. Mr. Chairman, can I ask my chief officer, Ms. Macfield, next to answer, please?
Gloria
Yes.
McPhail Nixon, Chief Officer, Portfolio of the Civil Service. Through you, Mr. Chairman, the ex gratia pension program relates to the Public Service Pension Plan. It is for civil servants who worked prior to the 1999 pensions law, who did not receive COS or gratuity, who are Caymanians and are age 60 and above, with the exception of persons who have been medical boarded who are eligible to receive it prior to reaching the normal retirement age of age 60.
Mr. McLean?
Are people who are medical board prior to reaching the age of 60?
Mr. Chairman, through you, that is persons who meet all of the other criteria that I just listed, but instead of having to wait until they attain the normal retirement age of 60, if they otherwise meet the conditions and are medical boarded, they can receive it earlier.
Ex gratia payment?
Correct, sir. An ex gratia pension payment.
But wouldn't they be getting pension?
So, Mr. Chairman,
Sure, proceed.
this is for persons who were not receiving pensions but worked for the government previously. So after their employment after that time would have been covered by the defined contribution pension program that came into effect, but it would have meant that they had a portion of their employment tenure when they were not receiving any form of pension or payment in lieu of pension, in which case they are then eligible to receive this ex gratia pension payment.
And Mr. Chairman, I'm understanding that the problem I'm having on this comprehending further is it's increasing. How can we add one this year when governments, you have to be working for them 10 years to be vested, or you were under your, because when we stopped that and did the defined contribution, it was 99, 97. That's more than 10 years now. But that ex gratia should not be increasing. What I'm trying to ask is, aren't we okay with that now? Because that would mean someone was medical board prior to this year. And if I'm wrong, I need some explanation.
Through you, Mr. Chairman. There are persons who will continue to become eligible for the payment as they attain age 60. We currently have 163 individuals who are receiving it. Those persons might also be receiving a pension, a normal pension, for the portion of their time that was covered by the revised pension law. But for the portion when they were not receiving anything, this ex gratia pension plan applies. So there are currently 163 individuals that are receiving this, with other persons applying and becoming eligible.
You okay now, Mr. McLean? Okay. If there are no further questions, then oh, my apologies.
No problem. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I know that the member is a bit familiar with this question. There are a number of medical personnel worked at the hospital, some of them over 30 years, before it became an authority, that some of them did get some little pittance, but I know that, and I was spoken to the DG about this, I know he's checking to see if anything can be done for some of these people. They've worked here a long time. I know some of them did get probably when they renewed their contract. But if they was to retire now, they would be literally getting literally peanuts. And I know the commitment on many of these, specifically some of the doctors and the nurses, It's not a lot of them that I know he has indicated that it can be looked at. I just wanted to bring that to the attention of the Finance Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Eden. Mr. Bush?
Some time ago, and we in Cabinet, we dealt with a number of people who had retired after working 30-odd years for government, were not pensionable because they had started out with under the old system of gratuities. But of course, what that wasn't anything much income as time went on. And we made an agreement that they would qualify in certain areas for minimums. So what Mr. Eden is asking, are they not caught under the same thing that the Deputy Governor would know? They should be caught under that same arrangement that we made.
Mr. Chairman, through you. Correct. So the provisions, I didn't speak about what the benefits were, but you're correct. There were certain provisions that were put in place to make sure that at least certain minimum amounts were provided. Then based upon the amount of years that persons worked who were not, again, receiving any other form of pension payment in lieu, that amount could increase. So for persons who worked for government and received neither pension nor any other payment in lieu of pension, which would have included contracted officers' supplement, if that was from 4 to 9 years, then there's a $300 minimum monthly payment that they receive as their ex gratia pension payment. If it was 10 or more years, then the minimum is $450 and goes up depending upon the number of years they worked.
Thank you. Mr. Miller?
Mr. Chair, I just want to clarify something. This ex gratia pension payment is only available to Caymanians. And we're not talking now about some expat who worked in government for 10, 15 years, got his COS every 2 years, then became Caymanian, but didn't work in the service long enough to qualify for a pension. Are we giving him ex gratia pensions for those years after he became Caymanian?
Mr. Chairman,
Mackey.
through you. So in terms of the persons that are getting it, it's correct that those persons need to be Caymanian. If they were not Caymanian at the time they were hired and were receiving COS or other forms of payments, that period of time would not be eligible for consideration for an ex gratia pension payment. The law is very clear that you were working for government and not receiving a pension or a payment in lieu of a pension. So any form of contracted officers supplement and so forth would not be qualifying time to allow you to receive an ex gratia payment.
Thank you. Mr. Bush?
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Eden mentioned doctors, we mentioned, I'll talk about teachers, for instance. Number of them, and by the answer from Ms. Nixon, I just want to be clear in my mind that we're not dropping people that deserved. If they worked, they were hired in 1970, they got a gratuity, whatever that was at that time, which if you go back, you can see salaries were nothing. And if they received, they became Caymanians over the years, they retired. Are we saying that we didn't take any cognizance of that period?
I think she's saying the law does not allow them to recognize the period during which they were receiving the COS gratuitous payment that you referred to. But then after that, I think they would then qualify for the gratuitous, for the ex gratia payment.
And therefore, that's why we had different, if I remember correctly, That's why we had different levels of payment. Some received more than others. And I guess that's how, because even at that point I wasn't understanding how that was, but it would have been, must have been that, and what the chief officer just explained, that it was because they didn't, they had something early, became Caymanians, that sort of went away, and they started a pension, or is that what you're saying? They did start some kind of pension? Or they were not getting any pension? They stopped when they see, what do you call it?
Contracted officer supplement.
Yes, when that stopped, then they stopped getting that group of people I'm talking about. I want to make myself clear here. I mean, a little bit more. For me, any one of them teachers that came here and gave the amount of years that some of them gave, at a time when this country needed them mostly, and at a time when we had nothing, and at a time we couldn't pay them anything much, I'm not one can sit here and say that I am not going to support giving them something. I very well supported. That's why I pushed for it back then when I was in cabinet. You cannot do that to people. They are humans. And whether they're born here or they're born in Mars, they are humans that came in and made a contribution to our development. And some people would not have got an education if some of them same teachers hadn't pushed their parents to make sure that some of them children went to school. Back then, I am old enough to know. I know who were pushing for me. They didn't get it, but I knew who were pushing for me. I'm not going to sit here and say no.
The appropriation is as stands, despite the comments despite the comments that were made. No one requested that the figure be increased or reduced, so the appropriation is as stands. So therefore,
Yeah, no. What I want to make sure clear in my mind that we're not leaving anybody behind that we could be helping.
okay.
Mr. Chairman, I wish to make it very clear that I was just confused as to how it was because of what I know it should have been. I never came in here to stop anybody because there are nurses too. And there are police officers as well who worked very hard here when we were NOTHING and built us to something. And it bothers me that those people have to live in a country where the cost of living is so high and they have to go and get work until they're in their 70s. Whatever little assistance we can do for them and the others of us who helped build this country as well, hailing from West Bay straight to Cayman.
Mr. Chairman, I made the remarks following what Mr. Eden was querying, because he was querying about nurses. And I was asking, as I said, people who work for the government. I pointed out teachers because teachers are special to me anyway. Not that others haven't made a contribution. If I said people working for civil service, then it meant all across the board.
Thank you. Let us now proceed to vote. So all those in favor of OE 19, ex gratia recipients plan payments for $1,213,000, standing part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, no. OE 71, Commonwealth Parliamentary Association, $125,000 on page 280. Are there any questions? All those in favor of OE 71, Commonwealth Parliamentary Association for $125,000, standing part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye.
Aye.
OE 99, ex gratia payments for former members of the Legislative Assembly, $12,000 on page 281. Are there any questions?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I certainly want to query what this is all about and whether it is members or member.
Thank you. Deputy Governor.
Mr. Chairman, we had a former member of this honorable house who served for during the time when you had to work more than a term in order to receive a pension. So I can't remember the years, but certainly there was a time when you had to work more than a term. Sorry, more than 2 terms, I believe.
6 years.
2 terms or 6 years. So this individual served 1 term, and they made representation to the government and asked for assistance as to whether they could receive the pension. It was stated that they were not entitled to the pension, but given their particular circumstances and their contribution to the people of the Cayman Islands, the government would give them a ex gratia payment of the figure that we have here, and that we would look to see what changes needed to be made to the pensions law.
So, Mr. Chairman, if this is not members, take off the IS, this is a member. That's misleading. It's one person, right? One.
It's
One person, yeah.
Mr. Chairman,
That's
it's one
only
person.
is misleading. And I am saying that deliberately because the truth is we have more than one person that is in need in who serve this house. And I'm not here. I wouldn't do them what they do to me, Mr. Chairman. I wouldn't do them what they do to me. But she should be waiting like everybody else until if they're going to amend the law so that these persons can get something. Then in fact, when we passed the law, that was the intention, and we were told that was covered. Now, lo and behold, they're saying it's not covered. But I took it every step of the way from the Attorney General. I think if you go here in the record, you will see that they said that it would cover those persons, because the truth is that person did access from then, and we took it upon ourselves to do so. But you're going back a whole year to give them a ex gratia must be forgetting on the radio and saying how good the government is. And whatever criteria is used for her, then everybody else should get it. There are others in this country who are seriously bad off that I think, I mean, I'm not talking about the general public because we know what the financial situation is for the country. I'm talking about people connected here. And we don't have a lot, but if you're going to give one, you better up this and give the rest of them the same thing, because how in the world can any government justify giving one person when there are others who serve the same thing? As I keep saying now, she ain't no worse off than anybody else right now.
Thank you. Mr. Eden?
She don't leave me alone.
Mr. Chairman, I may be treading on holy water. In light of this, and I know what this one is, but I'm referring to past Speaker of the House.
Yes.
I know the concern was health insurance benefit, and I'm not sure whether she was entitled to pension. Being a Speaker of the House, whether that would clarify her as a member. And I know that they're working on it, and it's supposed to be some law that is being brought to allow this to be provided. I just wonder what's the follow-up. I know my colleagues in caucus try to tell me about it all the time, but it shoots over my head.
Thank you, Mr. Eden.
Mr. Chairman, I certainly want to go along with Mr. Eden in this regard. How I feel about this, and let me put my feelings, and feelings don't translate into law until you do so. But I certainly believe that anybody that gives any time here deserves something. Now, the general public mightn't agree with me, or some of the general public, but I know what we go through. And the Speaker, while they get a decent salary, has to face similar elected and unelected. I happen to know that people go to them the same way, because the truth is a lot of people don't differentiate. Even though you have speakers that is unelected, they still go to them. I know people used to go to Ms. Sybil all the time. And I know that people just go to Ms. Lawrence. They don't differentiate. A lot of people don't. So they carry some burden when we put them in that chair. And we put them in that chair. Of course, they agree, but we put them in the chair. And I believe that the least that we can do is to offer them, at least this point in their life, offer them something on insurance and something on a pension.
Thank you, Mr. Bush.
I only, no, they don't get only if the deputy governor agrees. Only if he agrees to get them something, they get it.
Deputy Governor, you want to respond to anything that's been said, or should we proceed to vote?
Just to say that we have not had any other representation in relation to this, and the government did accept that if other persons came forward in similar circumstances, then they would be entitled to the same treatment. In relation to the former speaker who was just here recently, we did cover her with health insurance, but I am not aware what her pensions arrangements are, if any. So I've been told she is receiving a pension.
But not insurance. It's the other way around. It's the other way around. She's not, I don't think they're offering any health benefits.
We offered, sir. I can't tell you that she took it up, but we certainly offered.
I certainly believe, and I would ask you, sir, Mr. Chairman, through you, I would ask the deputy governor to really look at it and see that she is properly covered. We can't do that to people.
I agree, sir, and I certainly will.
See that she's properly covered.
Yes, sir.
Mr. McLean, if you're going to speak into the microphone.
Mr.
please.
Chairman, as I understand the parliamentary pension law, speakers are entitled to pensions by virtue of their tenure, the fact that you're speaker. And it was done that way specifically because people get appointed who are not members of this legislature to protect them from serving 2 years, 4 years in that chair, and they just walk out and they are not compensated for the time that they have spent. And this was, and I'll support the leader of the opposition, this was ventilated seriously in 2002, 2003, somewhere in that area. And because prior to that, speakers weren't entitled to it. And we made sure it was put in there at that time. And there were provisions made for health insurance and the like as well. Now, I don't know what has happened to it over time, but I recall that specifically. My good friend from Baden Town, Mr. Eden, remembers us sitting in there many long hours, and the speaker now. And so I don't know where it has gone.
Yeah. Mr. Chairman, just to say that I've been advised that former speakers do get pension, and the former speaker that we're talking about is getting a pension. Where there's an anomaly is with health insurance, because the majority of other speakers have either been civil servants or past MLAs. I believe she was the first person that we brought in here who was neither. In other words, she was never a civil servant. She was never a previous parliamentarian. Right. So that we then had to offer her the coverage until we can fix the problem.
Okay, thank you.
But I want to make sure that they will look at the situation with the health coverage.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Moses.
Mr. Chairman, the Deputy Governor has given an undertaking to continue to review this to make sure that everyone that falls into this category receives fair and equitable consideration. I'd just like to state on behalf of the government supports that position that the Deputy Governor has explained.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Chairman, by the Deputy Premier jumping in now, is he saying that the others, because we have no law yet, this is ex gratia. We have no law for them because they're saying it didn't cover them. But since you're saying that, so you're going to make sure that the others can get the same thing she getting? Is you going to make sure the rest of them people, because I think some of them are women, can get the same thing that Nora getting?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, what I said was that the deputy governor had made it clear that they're going to continue to review to make sure that the people that fall into this category are treated fairly and equitably. And the government supports that position.
Find the money, get it for them people.
Okay, thank you. Let's proceed to vote. So all those in favor of OE 99, ex gratia payments for former members of the Legislative Assembly.
She should be on your radio tomorrow morning.
OE 99. All those in favor of OE 99, ex gratia payments for former members of the Legislative Assembly, $12,000 standing part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, no. OE 100, depreciation of the portfolio of civil service executive assets,
Mr. Chairman.
$170,000. All right. We'll move on to the next one. So OE 100, depreciation of the portfolio of civil service executive assets, $170,000. Are there any questions? Are there any questions? Equity investments, EI 35, portfolio of the civil service, $91,000. Are there any questions? Okay, we'll wait until we have a quorum. Once we take the vote on these appropriations, that will conclude the proceedings for this evening, and then we'll return here tomorrow morning, 9:30 a.m. sharp, to examine appropriations to the Minister of Education, Employment and Gender Affairs, as well as the appropriations to the following, which would include the Attorney General, appropriations to the Cabinet on behalf of the Office of the Director of Public Prosecutions, appropriations to the Cabinet on behalf of the Office of the Director of, Public Prosecutions again, and then the Public Accounts Committee, the Oversight Committee of the Legislative Assembly. Yeah, so those that I've just mentioned there. Do we have a quorum now? Okay, here comes someone. We'll do these in bulk. All those in favor of OE 99, ex gratia payments for former members of the Legislative Assembly for $12,000. OE 100, depreciation of the portfolio of civil service executive assets, $170,000. And EI 35, portfolio of the civil service for $91,000, standing part of the schedule to the bill, please say aye. Those against, no. Thank you all very much. That concludes our proceedings for this evening. We will now adjourn until tomorrow morning, 9:30 a.m.